All right. So just to give you guys an idea, so this is the application start. So we have things called activities. I think we have learned that from the previous lessons, previous courses maybe. So this is going to be the main activity. On create is a life cycle event emit by the activity, and uh, we normally set the content. We normally start our application UI rendering part by simply calling the set content method. Okay, so we have followed the XML based UI. So it is something similar. We have the similar context or similar syntax that we have in XML based one. So we have the same thing in Jetpack Compose. We just need to call it in a different way. And we have the theming section, which will apply the whole theme for the application. Then we have the scaffold, which is coming from Angular material itself. So we have a bunch of helper functions that we can start with. So we don't have to work with things like fonts uh, and things like paddings and everything. So yeah, everything is within a scaffold. And we have a bunch of modifiers in here. And within that modifiers and everything, we have a simple composable function, sometimes we call. It is called the greeting composable. And this greeting composable is expecting two things. One is a name, and the second thing is a modifier. And you guys can see the greeting modifier in here. And it's a simplest form of composable, which contains a name and a simple modifier. And the text is what we call in what we call in compose Jetpack Compose. Text is also a composable. Whenever you want to show something, something like a text field, text view, actually not a field, text view, we would use this text composable, which is built into the Jetpack Compose itself. But if you want something your own, if you want to create your own composable, like this greeting composable, you can simply follow this uh, so simply follow this and you can create your own composable. So that's basically it. And there are a bunch of other composable views that you will find. Okay, so text is like very basic of very basic UI element, I would say. If you want to have more into things like layouts, especially rows, columns, and everything, you need to use different composables for that. Okay, so my expectation is you guys to follow along the layouts and everything. It's not going to be something that I am going to be following, or I'm not going to be like teaching you guys how to do MVVM based UI designing. If you want, I can I have the reference for the um, last course section, which we talked about MVVM in detail. In fact, I will share it right now, so you guys can see what we are doing in in here. Okay, we KMM. That's okay. Jetpack. Yep. So I have a separate video on Jetpack Compose. Let me share it to you guys right now. So if you want to learn the basics of these things, let's look at the same thing. It's not been changed much. So rather than me spending the same thing and explaining the same thing again and again, you guys can take the basics, how to do a layout and everything. We'll go further by expanding our knowledge on how we can implement MVVM architecture in here. Okay, so basically, you guys can remember we have a couple of layers or couple of sections in our application. So in this scenario, we'll be utilizing those couple of layers. So especially in MVVM architecture, we have view, we have the model, and we have the view model. Okay, so that is like the basic components of uh, of uh, a application that we'll be using. So within MVVM architecture, within the MVVM architecture, it is really easy that couple of things that we need in order to gain the MVVM features. We need to do we need to have um, some sort of setup, some sort of what we call these things like we need some things like observability, right? So we need to know how we will be using observability. Step by step. Sorry. How we'll be using observability, and these what are the components that we need in order to create observables in the first place. As you can remember, in MVVM architecture, we have one-way binding and we have observable bindings. So the view itself have MVVM architecture, and the view itself is talking to the view model. You can communicate from view to view model, but the other way around, where view models want to talk to view, we can't just call the view itself. We need to invoke via observability. That means observables should be used in order to communicate backwards. So that's something that we need to take into mind. Otherwise, what will happen? We can't violate the MVVM what we call MVVM principles. Okay, so MVVM principles should be kept in, and all the other things that we are using are not going to be affecting as well. Okay. So let's get started. First of all, there are a few things that we need to understand in terms of the architectural itself. Different technology stacks that we need to work with. Okay, so we know the architecture itself. We know the architecture, how it's gonna be, work with, like what are the components in the application. But there are things that we need to enhance our application. We need to add few more things. So few more dependencies will be added. So let's get started with the basic setup. So first thing that we need to do is have the capabilities of MVVM architecture pattern. So you can build on MVVM architecture pattern, but it's easy if we can leverage and use an existing existing technologies that would help us. Basically, you don't need to reinvent the wheel with MVVM architecture or even any architecture. So what my suggestion would be, we should know what are the existing libraries that is out there and how we can modify or how we can utilize those things in order to make the application that we want, especially with MVVM architecture in mind. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get MVVM architecture helper libraries, or help what are the things that we can get with MVVM architecture. So there are a few Android helper libraries that is coming as Android X dependency. That means totally it's up to the user to check out, okay, if I am gonna developing an application, whether I'm gonna use MVVM or not, whether I'm gonna just do a POC. I don't have time to have this MVVM and everything in place. So what sort of things that I'm gonna get started in, and whether I'm gonna be using these things in my application. So it's up to the developer to have the complete control over what we're going to be doing. So these dependencies, the MVVM architecture dependencies, those things will come as external dependencies. So if you like, if you want, you can have those things as a dependency, and you can develop MVVM architecture application. If you don't like, you can use the old-fashioned way. So first library that we'll be focusing on, that we need to know, is the MVVM Android X lifecycle view model library, and there are two variants of that. One built for Compose, one is built for the older version, the XML version. So we will be working with the latest Android view model composable dependency. So we need to import that. So remember, we have extensively talked about the application architecture in previous course module. We know why there are two build gradles and so on and so forth. So we need to make sure what is the right app that we need to do, or right place where we need to define our dependencies. And okay, so with that, we have our dependency section right around here. So we have a bunch of dependencies that is already helping with things with implementation, testing, and Android testing. So a couple of libraries that we'll be using is the Android X lifecycle view model composable library. So let's import that. So you guys can see that the definition, the descriptions that we are using is kind of changed. That's because we are using KTS. I'm not sure whether we have used the Gradle Groovy syntax or Gradle KTS syntax, but in this with the latest releases, everything is now in KTS format rather than Groovy based dependency injection. So it's kind of the same. You don't have to worry about learning new things. It's just the syntax might be a little bit changed, but all the things that you will see in here kind of like the same. The settings might be a little bit different, but all the things that you will see in here, it's going to be probably the same syntax and semantics would be the same thing that you need to use. Okay. So we have the library sections in here. So this is a new thing if you are not familiar. So if you guys can go to the build.gradle, you will see that an implementation dependency is here, that is in lib, Android, and Material 3. That's so basically it's saying that we are using Angular material version 3 in this scenario. And if I click on it, you guys can see Android X Material 3. It is giving the old way of having the libraries like we used to have. So in here, Android X Material 3, the group is this, and the name of the package is this. So we have, sorry, we have the same thing. We have the Android X view model, or it's basically coming from Android X lifecycle. So we need to import the version for which will support with us with view model implementation in Android, especially the Jetpack Compose in this section. So little bit of change here and there, but nothing major that you guys can't handle or something like that. So we need the Android X lifecycle. So I can remember Android. So Android X. Let me just copy this. It's easy. So Android lifecycle, that is the base package that we are going to be working with. And what we need is the group and the name. So the group itself is actually Android X life cycle. So this is the group that I am interested in, where I can find life cycle. Actually, I will call the view model compose as well. Compose, so I don't interact with anything else. So the dependency in here, Android X lifecycle view model compose. Okay, so the group is same like what you see in the Android lifecycle, and what I need is the actual name of the dependency. So I'll be using the name tag in here, like what we see in here. Name is going to be lifecycle view model compose. Okay, remember this is, since this is Jetpack Compose, we need to have this life cycle view model compose at the end. Otherwise it will download the older version, or not the older version, the incompatible versions with we use with the XML one. So make sure we are using composables. We need to use the compose version. So next thing is, you might ask what is the version that we'll be using. So you guys can see in here version reference core Kotlin TX, that you can use something like that. In here, if you haven't defined anything like lifecycle runtime RX, those kind of thing, those kind of dependencies that you see in here, they are using the lifecycle runtime KTX version in here. So likewise, we can define our own version. Probably you guys can see that there is an error in here. The new version is available, right? Like two minor versions are there. But what I am going to do is, since I don't want to jeopardize my application by simply updating these things, as we have seen, we need to be very careful about the compatibility of these applications. Okay, just changing the version would not make all the other things will work as well. So we need to be really careful when we are using that. So I'm going to be using the lifecycle version, that is 2.6.1. I'm going to use the same version for my lifecycle view model Jetpack Compose. So I'll be using the version reference, version ref, lifecycle runtime KTX, lifecycle runtime KTX has the version of 2.6.1. I'm going to use that as my same version for my view model compose, lifecycle view model compose. Okay, so we have added the dependency in the library version toml file. So it doesn't mean we are using in our application. So I need to like sync it now. So what it's gonna do is like the previous versions, it's gonna go and get download the um, lifecycle view model Jetpack Compose into my application, but it doesn't mean that I am currently using this. So in order to use, this is just a definition. Okay, this toml file containing, okay, we have this jar in our application, but we haven't decided whether we are using it or not. So we need to come to this implementation. If you guys can remember, this is the same implementation dependency. But right now, earlier versions, we were using the implementation, something similar to this, something similar to like the library and the group, then the version. Okay, this is like the older version that we have done. Right now we have moved all these dependencies into our libs.versions.toml file. So we'll be referring there. So under libs, uh, you will find Android X, and Android X will have material, is it that? Life cycle and view model. Okay, so you guys can see that that is the dependency that we are using right now. So if I click on here, it is referring to the view model dependency that I should be using. Wait a second. Did Android X life cycle? Give me a second. I think I need to define the correct version. Life cycle view model compose. Android lifecycle runtime KTX, that is fine. It should, if I click on it, it should come to the, okay, it's coming in. Okay, I need to just sync it. So if you're using the correct versions in here, now you guys can see, and you just need to sync it. So libs Android X lifecycle view model compose. If I click control click on this, in my case command click on it, it will show, okay, this is the library that we will be using, and this is the version reference, and all the rest is the same, the group and the name. That would make more sense. So this is like new way of organizing your code. So get used to it. Of course, you guys know the older version, how you guys can get the Android lifecycle things in XML based applications as well as the Groovy. Lucky for you guys, you don't have to use the Java version that me myself used earlier days, like I'm not sure, it's like 10 years ago. So it's way more complicated than this. But right now, everything is changing, dynamically adding, and making our lives easier. Okay, so we have our dependency, at least the view model, and this is for compose. So we need to make sure that that is in the that is the version that we so at least remember, this is the version that you need in order to work with the composables. Okay, do not add only view model without compose. As I mentioned, it might break your application, so make sure you have the dependency correct. Okay, we get more notes. Okay. All right. Next thing that we need to do, we'll check the application is in a way that um, we have the things as we like. Okay. So first thing that to check even the application is having all these dependencies and all. We are not done. We need way more things to do. But right now, to check whether everything is in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new UI section in here. Probably um, there are different way of organizing the code. Some people like to organize it by module. Some people like to organize it by the view. But in MVVM architecture, it's always good to have organize everything by their functionality or the module that we will be working with. Okay, so um, this is what we call simple application game news. So my idea is to get latest news from various sources and show it in one single app. So what I need is I need to create a view to show the game news. And that's it. It's not going to be like very fancy or something like that. It's just going to show you guys some some news about games. That's it. And so in order to create, we will have to create a very simple application in here. So I am gonna go and create what we call a simple module in this scenario. Okay, so I'm gonna call these like let's say for example I'll create a new package. Remember where we're gonna create it. Okay, so under UI I'm gonna create a module called game screen. Okay, or game news. Let's keep it simple. Oh, I'll say news feed. That's my better news news feed. Can use okay, sorry, news feed. So I have a new package called news feed under my UI declaration, and there are as you guys can remember in MVVM architecture we have few things in our baskets. The first thing is the view, then the second thing is view model, the third thing is the data layer or repository or the model layer that we all know. So sorry, to keep things organized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my views UIs in the UI section. I'm going to separate my data or the repository or the model and everything into a separate section. Okay, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to first I'm going to start with something simple. So rather than making the application way more complex, I will try to create first a view model. Okay, so normally if if the module itself is newsfeed, then we normally name right after the module name followed by view model. So my uh, module in here is called newsfeed. So the view model name, the file name that I'm going to use is going to be newsfeed view model. Okay, that's up to you for the naming convention, but it's as always, it's good idea to have the naming right after the module, so you don't have to search everywhere. First, I'm going to create a Kotlin class file. in my view model. And I am going to create the class in this scenario, and I'm going to call it news feed view model. Okay, so news feed view model. So this is my class. So I just created the newsfeed view model. So there are a couple of things in Android view model that we need to be thinking out. So the first thing is that we need, if you are creating a view model, there are a bunch of stuff that you guys need to do in terms of view models. So there is observability things, there are immutabilities, a lot of things that we need to cover in order to create the application. So all the hustle, all the things that we need to implement view model, you don't have to worry about that. Just extend view model class from Android X lifecycle. Okay, lifecycle view model, I think the whole package itself. So Android X lifecycle view model, that is the place that you need to extend your custom newsfeed model. Okay, so that's giving me an indication that okay, this is the view model that I am going to be working with. All right. Okay, first thing first, done. The view model is created. It's not like completed, but as you guys can see, we are importing, our imports works and everything is working as we expected in here. Uh, All right. The next thing that I'm going to be, we'll be doing is the view model is created. Now we need to think about what are the information this view model is gonna, host, or the view model is gonna interact with. Okay, so that what we call a view model state. So to understand a view model state, what we need to understand is how we're gonna model the application. Okay, so for example, in my application, newsfeed application, I am gonna see a few things. That is a list of news, right? Obviously, if I am working with the view, I will probably see list of news. Okay. Then another thing that I would probably see, if I have something like a search bar, whatever the text that I am putting in there, that is going to be something that we need to remember. What's the current search? Okay. Then what do we have other things? For example, if I want to make a change in my, or if I want to view a particular article, I can click on one and I can, without going back to the API, I can just simply show the current uh, uh, current viewing news. Okay, so the state, think as the state as what is the current shape of my application. Okay, the current shape of my application. So it is containing a list of news, it is containing search, current searching text, it's containing what we call the current selected item. So many things that we at this given state we can keep. So if we change something, the state changes. Say, for example, if I apply a filter to my application, let's say I want to see news from 2002 to 2003. Okay. So I have a filter which containing the state of the starting date, another state containing the end date, and based on those two inputs, my list, the current showing news, they will change as well. It will change as I change the state. So we need, when we are thinking about a view, we need to think about the dynamic components, dynamic part of that application. Okay. um, it's not gonna be uh, it's not gonna be like thinking in a way that you should understand, or uh, you should you should have like um, better understanding what are the dynamic components of your application. So it is not gonna come into you right right after you do a UI design. It might come after the interaction point of your application. So if you have multiple interaction points, based on that interaction points, you will gain the knowledge of, okay, this should be in our state. So if I change this, this should also change. So the current situation, the current shape of our application is determined by what we call the state. Okay. So what's the view model job is to react on those state changes. Say, for example, if I change the state of the filtering start date, then my application would have a different list view, different search criteria. There'll be multiple changes happening. The view model is responsible for maintaining that state changes. Depending on the state changes, the UI would be changing as well. Okay, let's see this in action just to give you guys an idea what state is. State is all about the current shape of our application, current parameters that we have in our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what we call the current shape of my application, or current application UI state of my application. Okay. So let's assume that I have a list of news feeds. Then I have a list of let's say starting date and end date. So it's going to be like really simple state. Okay. So I'm going to create a new what we call a Kotlin class, Kotlin file. In this scenario, I'm going to creating a class itself. So the class name that I am going to be creating is something called news feed. You can call it state, or you can call it, sometimes people use UI state. That's depend. But normally, since this state is directly binding to the UI, you can call it UI state if you like. Okay, you can simply say state. So newsfeed UI state. So based on the changes that we do into these UI states, the newsfeed UI state, the UI that is consuming this, the view it's consuming this, will react to these changes and act upon it. It will render new stuff, or it will remove things. So this state have the this state have the things that need to describe the UI itself. Okay. All right. All right. So let's see how we can look into the state. So let's say I have a search keyword. That means I have a search bar on the top. So I can say variable and make sure this is a data class. So I don't have to write getters and setters like old people. So first thing that we need to do is current search query. Okay, and it's going to be a type of string. Initially, I am going to instantiate with nothing. Since this is a data class, I need to have brackets instead of, there you go. Okay, that's good. That's what I like. So the newsfeed UI will contain a string field which is containing the current search query, and we will have list of current, or we can say just news, or we can say news cards or whatever. I'll just simply say news, and we need to take the shape of this news. Okay, so as we did data modeling on earlier courses, you guys know you guys should know what are the things that is available. For simplicity, I'm gonna create a new class right around here, and I'm gonna create a news class, and the news class is gonna have in simple terms, it's gonna have a title, var a title. So the news will have a title containing a string, and it will have a subtitle. That's it. If you have images and all those things, of course we can model it. For now, I'm not interested in the modeling part of the data, just to demonstrate how it's gonna look like in the state. So we have a new state in here. So the state shape would be a list of news. Okay, so there will be a list of news. There will be a current search query, and if I am doing advanced search, uh, uh, if we are having a current search, then uh, we have other things to buy. Say, for example, let's say start date. Okay, then we have maybe a date, and maybe, do you have the website? Date, uh, that's from Java util dates, and we have end date. It's also going to be a date. Okay. Give me a second, guys. Mhm. Okay, sorry about that. So this is the current state. We have a search query, we have a set of news, we have a start date, we have end date. So by looking at this, we can simply visualize the UI itself. So at the top, you will have few start date and everything, and a few of the list of dates and everything in here. So basically, we have a search bar on the top, which contain the current search query. We have extra 2 date fields, start and end time. So that is another one. And we have a list of fields. It's going to be a really simple application. So this UI, UI will have very simple things that need to keep in the state. Okay, so in order to create this state, in order to make this happen, we need all of these data. Perhaps we can have like default values in here. Say, for example, in list, we can have an empty list and starting date, maybe today. We can have date for today, and these will be what we call the initial state. Okay, so in the initial state, what we have in here, empty list, empty search query. The starting date would be date today. That means it's going to be the right at that moment when the application start. Maybe this is not a good idea, start and end date to be have the same date. So let's keep it simple. Let's keep it null for the moment. If I'm putting null, I think I have to put a union type in here. Wait a second. Non-null. Okay, I need to change to a nullable. Okay, there you go. I will make this nullable. That means by the initial state of this newsfeed UI, the current search query is going to be an extra string. The list of newsfeed is going to be empty list. Starting date and end date will be null. So this is what we call one single state of our application. This is at any given moment. This newsfeed state is what it's going to change. So for example, by executing a user's action, okay, say for example, the search query has changed. Then the search query will be changed in here. And based on that search query, the list of news would change. So from empty list, it will containing some details. From empty string, it will contain the last search keywords. So that's kind of the thinking pattern of UI state changes. So this will be our initial state. And whenever we are interacting with the application or whenever there are some events occurred, this state will change. Okay, so keep in mind this UI state is like 99% time going to be matching our UI description. Okay, there are some here and there things that might be changing, but sorry, most of the time the UI state represent the UI itself. Okay. All right. Okay. For the next thing, what we're gonna do is we will look into we have state and everything. Next thing that we will be using is next thing that we'll be using is something what we call data flows. Okay, so how we gonna communicate these things into a separate into our UI view. As I mentioned earlier, remember the view is still not, we haven't created any view, but the view itself should not invoke the UI for any updates. The view model, it will send the observable changes to the view. Okay, so you guys can clearly remember the arrowheads that have a particular job. So from view to view model, we can directly invoke. Okay, but from view model back to the view, we can't send anything. It will violate the pattern. So instead of sending things directly, what we would do is we would use flaws, or we would use observability or reactiveness in this case. So there are, as I mentioned, there are a lot of ways that we can achieve observability. Okay, observability, there are a lot of libraries out there. So we can use whatever observability libraries out there, but time to time, so there we earlier versions we had live data. Then before that we had things like RxJS or Rx Kotlin in this scenario. So various libraries, various forms of observabilities, how we can achieve observability is there. It's not a single way of single way of achieving observability. We have plenty of ways to do so. Okay, so in order to get observability with the view models, the latest version, we use something called state flow. Okay, so state flow is something that we can use to achieve observability using Kotlin based classes. Okay, so if you are using something like live data and all those things, you need to add another library to it. Okay, so the live data library, like what we have used in the beginning of the lecture, that we need to import view model stuff. So if you are using another library like live data, as I mentioned earlier, we need to import live data into our application. So it will slightly increase our application size. If you're using some another third-party library like Rx Kotlin, then another set of things will be added. But if you're using Kotlin and Kotlin coroutines, you can use Kotlin coroutine flows in order to communicate the observability. Okay, so if you don't know Kotlin coroutine, it's like a lightweight thread model system that you can run run computational block or any blocking request in a separate executable environment. We call these things as coroutines. So earlier days Java have things like threads, but coroutine express themselves as a mini thread kind of thing. So we have coroutines. Using coroutines, and coroutines have something called state flows, we can communicate, or we can achieve the what we call the observability. Okay, remember, state flows is one single way of doing that. There are other libraries, there are other ways that you can do. It's up to the choice of the architecture or anyone who is actually implementing this to have the idea whether we're going to use state flows, whether you're going to use live data, whatever. Make sure you know the library a little bit, so you don't get stuck in the middle and you don't know what the heck is going on. Okay. So we have something called state flow. So we must have we can have observables using state flow. So how we gonna do that? So state, this is the state model. Okay, this is how it's gonna states look like. But the state is managed by, remember, the state is managed by the view model itself. Okay, so if I want to manage the view, what I need to do is I need to create a state, and I am gonna call it as let's say UI state, since I have the UI state in here, and it's gonna be a mutable state flow. Okay, so the mutable state flow is the class that I am using to achieve observability in this MVVM application. So we will be using immutable state flow. So I'll give you guys some sort of work to understand. So we are using state flow, but in this scenario, we are using something called mutable state flows. Okay, so mutable and immutable is something that you guys should research upon. So take a note, and as a side thing, like a homework or something that you guys should follow upon, have a look around what is mutability and what is immutability. Okay, take a look around this. So you will have more idea about mutability. So basically, if you put mutable and immutability is whether we allow changes, mutations, or whether we not gonna allow mutations. Okay, if we are allowing mutations, that means we are mutable. If you are using immutables, that means we are not allowing any changes. Either you have to create a new variable or you have to use different memory location. That means a different variable. So we will create a new variable if we are changing. So take a close look at mutable and immutability. Otherwise you will get and you will have a little bit of no idea, or sometimes it's not going to make more sense. Okay, so we will have a mutable state. Okay, so this is gonna help us achieve observability, but it is not gonna say what are the data that we will be carrying or we will be having. Okay, so this is achieving the mutable state flow, help us to get the observability, but it does not know what are the data that it's gonna go with. Lucky for us, we created a state and we have the initial state like this. So we can say, okay, I'll be achieving observability using mutable state flows, and my state is gonna look like newsfeed UI state. Okay, so that means I am achieving observability using this state model. So my initial state, the default state, sometimes we call it, is current search query is an empty string, news field is empty list, and these two dates are not. Okay, so that is my current current uh, current state of my application. Okay, so when we are looking at our application, okay, so we need to have we will be having a mutable state which is shaped by this new UI feed, news feed. Should I have misspelled it? It should be news feed. Let me quickly refactor and rename that. Use feed by step. Okay. So we have observability, and the shape is newsfeed UI state. So this is going to be the default state. Okay. So the next thing, what we need to do is we need this UI state to be accessible from the outside world. Okay, outside world, this need to be accessible. So how we going to get that? We will see in We will see in a little bit later. Okay, so as you guys can see, the state that I have mentioned in here is gonna be in what we call is this is a private variable. Okay, so what does private means? This underscore UI state variable that we have defined here, it's going to be only available in newsfeed view model. It's not going to be available in anywhere else. So we don't have access to it. We don't have any access to this UI state underscore UI state view model. So underscore is used in Kotlin to indicate, okay, this is a private, but also we need to have the private keyword in here. So that is blocking directly accessing this state. Okay, you can't access this state. So that's something that you guys need to remember. We are not allowing direct communication with the current state. Okay, remember, view can send or view can interact with the view model, but the view model does not allow direct interaction with the view. Okay, so the view should observe these things. View should react on the changes that it's going to do. But the problem is now the UI state is in private. So how are we going to access this? How we going to make sure, okay, now we have a state, but how are we going to access all the changes that the state contains? So in order to do that, we create another variable called UI state. Okay, you guys can see the similarity apart from the underscore that you see in here. And that is that's going to be a state flow. And what is the type of that state flow? It's going to be a newsfeed UI state flow. So what is the value that it's going to get? It's going to get this value from, I think, as state flow. Yeah. Okay. So there is a variable that allows us to access the UI state, the newsfeed UI state, and it is called UI state. Do not get confused with the underscore UI state. This is not the same, but this one, the UI state, and the type is state flow, and newsfeed is the shape of it. So we will get a UI state as an observable value in the shape of newsfeed UI state. Okay, so you might ask, okay, why do we expose this UI underscore state private method in UI state right around here? Okay, the same thing, right? We are taking, but remember the observability. Okay, so if I give direct access to this UI state from my as a private, not a private one, but a public one, then anyone who is outside from the anyone who have access to the view model can change the state. Okay, they can change the state. Since this is the mutable state flow, you can change the state. But remember, within the view, you can't directly communicate with the view model and change the state. It should happen with some state changes that we are doing. Okay, so if I have given the access to this underscore UI state, what will happen is the view can use this to change the application. So that is an anti-pattern from view model. Always remember, if you want to change something, if you want to change the view itself, you need to do it via a action, reaction, or observability base. So that's why this is private, and the UI state that we are gonna go is come from this underscore UI state as state flow. So by doing such transformation, what will happen is anyone can listen to the UI state changes, but they do not have the power to change this. Okay, so this is going to be a truly a listener. Okay, when we convert this as to flow, you can't change the UI state. Sorry, you can't change the UI state, but only you can listen. Okay, or you can subscribe, or since this is observable, but the better word is you can subscribe. So if you are doing a change, that should happen within the view model itself, no exceptions. Okay, so if you are doing a change, that should happen in the UI state, and those changes, the changes that we are doing in the UI state should be listened by this UI state variable that we have. It's then observable, so you can observe all the changes. Let's see this in action right now. Remember, why do we have a private variable and why do we have a public state flow for that? Okay, to reduce any accidental UI interaction even and block. So we get the pure observability in this scenario. Okay. All right. Next thing, what we're gonna do is we can do simple changes. Okay. Let's say if we want to change something, if you want to change anything within the application, all you need to do is you need to call a function or call a method. Then we need to give the give these state changes a go. Okay, so let's see how we gonna do that. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little bit of change in the state itself. So we have a start date, we have an end date. So what I'm going to do is on a click of a button, I will set the start date and I will set the end date. Okay. Or I can change the I can change the current search query to whatever the whatever the value that I like. So let's start something very simple. So let's click on a button and manipulate this start date. Okay, simple use scenario. We click on a button, that button click will change our UI state. We will change the start date and the end date. Okay, so what I have to do is I need to prepare a function or prepare a method to do so. Okay, so I'm going to say function. I will create a function. Let's say I want to set the UI state, start date and end date, like a year apart. Okay, like a year apart. So if I click a button, the start date will be today and the end date will be the same day, but in an year, another year. So I'm going to say function add year filter. Let's simply call that, terrible name by the way, but it does get the job done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var start date, and I'm going to say date. Okay, so I'm going to if I click on this add year filter, what we'll do is it will have the start date as this, and var end date is going to be date, but plus Let me check. Remember actually. Okay. Need to create a calendar instance. Okay. Can create something like this local date time and now. So this is the current time plus, I think. Yeah, plus years, and I'll say 1. What's the issue in here? The call require and minimum 6. Okay, so basically, if I want to use the local now function, it requires API level 26. Currently, I am having 24. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just simply gonna change the required version. Since this is a demonstration, I don't expect version conflicts. So this is the minimum state. The version 24, I will increase to 26. Even that, with that, I'll have a lot of device coverage, no issues there. Okay, so it should remove the compilation error. Yeah, so I have changed the date time changes in here. So I have something called end date. I have something called the start date, but these are in 2 different formats. So this is a local date time. This is in date. Probably I should be able to convert to date or to local. To local. Wait, let me check local date time. Date. Can call from date from, right? I think that should work. Date from, I think I can create, I will call this one as local, and I will have another variable called end date, and that can be achieved from date from local, and I have to set some to instance and the offset of so on offset UTC. I need to convert between time zones. So basically, we can use val in here. Okay. So I have a start date and I have an end date. Okay. So the start date is going to be today and the end date is going to be an year from now. Okay. Now what I need to do is if I interact with this add filter button right now in from some sort of view, the start date and end date will be calculated and it need to be updated. It need to be updated in my state as well. So how I'm gonna update that value as well? It's fairly simple. So I am gonna do is first I need to get the value. So UI state dot value containing the current state. So as I mentioned earlier, since I have not done any changes, this value is going to be in default state. We'll see that in a bit. But now the state I am expecting is newsfeed UI state. So I have few things I can update. Start date equal to start date that I have in here. And we have end date, which is going to be equal to end date that we have in here. since these are not changing anything else, I can use for to keep it more keep it more memory efficient. So now what I have done, I have set the value of my state. Okay, since this is a mutable state, if I click on this, button, what it will do is it will set the assigned value from in here to the start date and the end date that we have defined in here. Okay, so this is how we're gonna change our state. We are changing our state by simply calling out this function. Okay, this function can be called from the UI itself or something like that. But hey, you can call this function, then we'll be able to interact with the state. But remember, if I am interacting, it need to be happen in the view model itself. You can't expect to do any changes to the state in the view itself. Why? It breaks or it violates the MVVM architecture. Okay, so remember the unidirectional data flow. That is the first thing that you should not forget. Okay, that's the most important thing that we should not compromise by anything. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have created a state. We have created a view model. Now, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use this view model in our view. Okay, first of all, we need to create a view. Then we will be using this simple view model and interact with it. Okay, so we have the newsfeed in here. So we have newsfeed view model, the newsfeed UI state. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new Kotlin class. Okay, so it's going to be having a composable view. Okay, so we'll be having a composable view. So to keep it simple, I would create a new Kotlin class and I will say news feed. Simply this is UI, so I can say simply newsfeed UI. And remember, when we are working with Kotlin, which the view is now a function, not a normal function, it's a composable function. So I will create a news feed layout. Okay, so the news feed layout. And it's a function to make sure to annotate it as a composable function. Otherwise, it will not work. It should be newsfeed layout. Okay, so what are the other things in order to create this composable? So I have created this composable, but there is no view at all. Let's have the basic things like we will add a modifier to this. Okay, a simple modifier. Other than that, we would not pass anything. Even the modifier is optional. If you do not need, you can just leave it as that. But for now, okay, let's leave it at easy, and we will see why we need the modifiers in this scenario. So we have a newsfeed layout, and I'm gonna simply return a text view, and it is containing news feed. Okay, so I have every basic function in here and composable here, and I'm gonna go and in here main view under the scaffold I'm gonna call this newsfeed layout. Okay, so if I run it again, if I run my application one more time, I should be able to see something very small but effective. So right now we have hello world in here. I think you guys can see. So instead of that, I have created a newsfeed layout and it should say newsfeed. Still building. Let's give it a little bit time. And there you go. It is showing in here, and you guys can see it's uh, overlaying in my, where you see, yeah, it's overlaying in my field. That means in my um, toolbar on the top. So what I have to do is, like we have seen in the padding, the inner padding should be given. So I have to pass this as a modifier. Okay, I will pass this as a modifier, but the modifier is not known by the newsfeed layout. So what I have to do is I have to capture the modifier like we have seen in here. I'll capture that modifier in here. So we have the newsfeed UI in here. Let me minimize here and there. Okay, I have the modifier in here, and I can ask the modifier to be the modifier that we have passed in here. Okay, and if I run again, this modifier is just simply adding what we call a padding. So you guys can see it is having a padding just on the top. Okay, so next thing that I need to do, this is like fairly simple. I'm gonna add what we called a button. That button that we will change the state. So before we add the button, I will just create one simple thing. I'll create a column. Okay, so these are um, layout UIs that we need to be working with, and I will give the column the modifier. So we will have we don't have to add each and every one in here with the mod padding that we need. So we have newsfeed and we have newsfeed 2. Run it again, and there you go. So we have 2 in a column. Right now, what we did was we created a very simple, very basic uh, view, composable view. Now we need to get the uh, we need to get the um, uh, we need to get the view model into this composable view. So we are going to get the view a composable section where we can use that to show the things that we have done. Okay, so remember we need to have the view model itself. Okay, how are we going to do that? So we have the what we call the function, this one, the layout. So before that layout, what I'm going to do is I am going to create another another wrapper layout that would make things easy for me to handle these things. Okay, so this is the newsfeed layout. So why do we need so many wrappers? You will get to understand as much as the components know only the information that they need to render, the component is easy to test. Okay, so we'll see these things, but right now, so we have this newsfeed layout. Okay, so rather than having text, I would say, okay, I will have the start date and I will have something called end date in here. So the start date is the date that I am getting from the data I'm getting from the view model itself. Then we have end date, which is gonna also coming from the view model itself. Okay, so my goal is to get that start and end date and show it in here. Okay, so we have the layout. The layout is purely responsible of displaying this stuff. Okay, displaying the UI and everything. It's not gonna be interacting with the view model directly, as I mentioned earlier. The reason being that if we access the view model directly from the layout, it's uh, it's changes that we are doing within the application or within the UI. It's going to be hard to test. Okay, so for example, we have something like this. Let's say we are firing the modifier in here, and the start date, it's going to be a date, and I'm going to say start date. I need to import this class. Okay. Currently redundant. Okay, I don't need this since this is not wanted. And end date, which I can pass in right around here. End date, and it's going to be type of date. Okay, so you guys can see why this kind of pattern is most efficient. So if I want to just to show the start date and the end date, I just need to pass and start date and end date. Is it coming from the view model? I don't care. As long as I get a start date and end date, this new feed layout would just simply show it. Okay, it just simply show it. And if I getting a few more stuff in here, the responsibility of this composable is to get the values and show it. It is not uh, interacting with any business logic. It doesn't care the start date is coming from the view model or the view, wherever, as long as this layout, this composable get a start date and end date, it would just show it in here. But in here you would see an error because the modifier now it need a start date. So I'm gonna provide a date like this, and the end date I'm gonna provide a date like this. So I am passing two dummy dates. Okay, so it's gonna be today. So if I refresh once more again, you guys can see the Wednesday, this and this, and it is showing in here. So the reason being that I am changing whatever the date that I provide in this new speed, it is going to show it in the UI. Okay, whether it is hard coded like this, whether it is coming from a view model, we don't need to worry. As long as we are providing two dates, it's going to show up. Okay, so that's why we need a wrapper kind of components. We call these components sometimes dummy components. Okay, and the dummy components job is just to display the data. It is going to display data, whatever the data that you are providing, as long as they are compatible. Like in this scenario, I'm providing two dates, and it does not care whether it is coming from anywhere. It's just going to show it. So we call those things as dummy data. So another component, which is this component, or we can say this scaffold component in here itself. This component is responsible for making all the connections. It is responsible for giving a date to display to this dummy component, and it is responsible for managing everything that this application or this page has to offer. Okay, so this one we called as a feature component. Okay, this one is what we call a feature component. So probably I would create another feature component in here to make things more nice. So I'm going to create a news feed. What we call those things. This is a layout. Let's call this is a news feed screen. Okay. So we have a newsfeed screen. I'm going to simply dump this preview. I don't need that right now. I am going to create a newsfeed screen. I don't need these things, at least for now. I can just simply pass the modifier if I want. Okay, modifier. So I don't need this name. I just need to call the newsfeed with a modifier. I'm gonna create the I'm gonna use the inner, sorry, what was the modifier padding in here, sorry. So I'm gonna create a modifier which is gonna be this. I don't need these two dates. Sorry, I need the 2 days like this. And the modifier that I am going to be creating, it's going to be this. So I'm going to say news feed, and the modifier is going to be this. There you go. I don't need a name in here. And the modifier that I am passing here, it's simply the modifier that I am getting. Modifier. Okay, so newsfeed, this shouldn't be newsfeed screen, but newsfeed layout. Okay, so now you guys can see I have a theme, scaffold, newsfeed screen, and the newsfeed screen is accepting a modifier. I am providing a one, and it's going to be a type of this modifier. And I am showing the newsfeed layout. It is accepting a modifier and 2 dates. Okay, so by simply looking at this newsfeed screen, we consider this one as a feature component. The layout, it is as a dummy component. So in order to make this as a feature component, make sure this one is interacting with our things as view model and stuff. Okay, so we need to create a function that's going to deliver the view model to this screen. Okay, so how are we going to do that? So we will create a new view model and pass it to the newsfeed screen, not the layout. Layout is there for displaying stuff, but the screen is responsible for making the view model and interaction with that. Okay, so how are we going to do that? So let me see. Okay, so other than the modify itself, I am gonna say VM, or I can simply say view model. Most of the time we call this VM, but the VM type is news feed view model, and it is instantiated by the view model class call that we're gonna do. Okay, view model. We need to import view model from here. Okay, so basically I am creating a new view model in the type of news feed view model, and I have created that using this view model function call. Okay, so really simple. Make sure you import the view model composable function in here. Now the newsfeed screen is equipped with a view model, and in here we are instantiating. Now, if you look closely enough in the screen view, we do not provide a view model in here. We just instantiate a view model in here and pass it to the view feed screen. Sorry. Okay, so we instantiate the view model. Now, what we're going to do is we will interact with the UI state. So if you guys can remember, we have a UI state in here. Okay, we just created this instance of the view model. Now, what we're going to do is we will be interacting with that UI state. So it's going to be a val, and I can say news feed UI state. Okay, I am going to simply call using the by keyword by VM dot. We have something called UI state, and I'm going to use this collect as state. Okay, so I have the it shows. Okay. Action import. Okay, I need to import the collection as state. This one. All right. So we have the view model. We have an instance of the view model. So this is how the view is interacting with view model. The view screen in here is having a instance of the view model, and the view model itself has this UI state. As I mentioned, there is a private and a public one. So this is like an observable. This is read only. And to access this, what we're going to do is we're going to say newsfeed UI state by this view model UI state collect as state. So now we have the information. Now we have the link to the state. Okay, so we have a view model. Using that view model, we have created state. In this view, we have the interaction to that state. So as I mentioned, state is a simple way of that I can represent the view. Okay, so if I want to get the state right around here in newsfeed UI state, newsfeed UI state, and I have the access to a end date, start date, and everything. So if I want to pass the start date, I'll just simply say, sorry, start date, but remember it's a type mismatch, because in our newsfeed layout, it is a mandatory one, but in here it is optional one, because if you look at the newsfeed state itself, this is an optional field right by the question. But if you look at the layout, in here, where is the layout? Where's the layout? Yeah, in layout, it is mandatory. Okay, the start date is mandatory. Either we can make it optional, or we can pass a default date in the scenario. So I'm going to make it optional, so the error goes away. So if I run this again, now you see the start date is null. Why null? Because the initial state of this, initial state of this start date is null. So it's gonna represent me with a null. So if I say new, sorry, not don't need new. If I say date, that means the initial state for this one is going to be a date, initial date for the end one is going to be null. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back in here. The second variable, we are passing the end date, but I'm going to do it newsfeed state end date. So we are getting the end date and the start date from here. So, and we are providing it to the newsfeed layout. Newsfeed layout, first one is the start date. Newsfeed layout, second one is the end date. And as you guys can remember, start date would be the today, end date is what we call empty or null variable. So we haven't assigned anything for the end date. We have assigned something for the start date. If I reload this once again, now you guys can see the start date is whatever the, I'm not sure if you guys can clearly see, but hope you guys can see. So the start date is the today, which is the initial state, and the end date, as we can see, it is now because we haven't provided any initial state on it. So that's how the state change is gonna happen. Now, what will happen, what we need to do is we need to change this state. We need to change uh, the, uh, the start dates and end dates. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to make changes in the start date and end date and all those things? Okay, so we can actually create a very simple UI in here. I'm just gonna say column, and within the column I'm gonna put this one, and the second one is a button. And the on click method, what I need to do is what I need to do in this on click method, but I think I need to provide a view, otherwise this button is gonna look like this. The second parameter, if I'm not mistaken, I think, let me check. Button layout. The first parameter is on click. Child or modifier, I can't remember exactly. Okay, within the text itself, I'm gonna say text in here, add or change to one year. Okay, I'll just have something like this. So if I refresh, I have changed to 1 year, but if I click on it, nothing happens, right? Nothing happens because I haven't told what should happen if I click on this. Okay, so I have the button, I have the on click event. What I need to do is I need to change the state of the application. I have a new state which contains the start date and end date. But in order to change the state, remember, I need to go with the VM itself. So we have the VM, and within the VM, if you guys can remember, oops, not this VM, but this, I have a function called add year filters. So basically what it do is it's going to change the start date and end date, which containing 1 year, and it's going to update the state of my application. Okay, so what if I call the VM dot add 1 year, add year filter when I click on this button. Okay, so basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, do I have the code format? I can't remember exactly. Can't remember the code for formatting the text, but you guys can see the screen. So when I click on the button, I'm using the VM, the instance for the VM, and I say add filter year. It will calculate the start year, it will calculate the end year, and it will update my UI state. Okay. And once the UI state is updated, it is giving, I'm not telling, okay, get the latest value and try to update. The VM itself is an observer. It is observing any changes that is happening for the start date, end date, or anything that's going to matter. And it should automatically update this news feed, start date and end date. Okay, let me restart. If I click on it, now you guys can see. I'm not sure whether really clear. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so start date is June 12, whatever the date, and the end date is Friday, June, and it should be 1 year from now. Okay, yeah, it's not showing the year, but you guys get the idea. Now, if I click on it, did I change the UI itself? No, but I changed the view model by simply calling the view model add filter. Here, it changed the start date and end date. It gives the changes to the mutable state flow. The state flow give that for the UI state. The UI state is listening in here, and it is giving those values to the newsfeed start date and end date. And remember, the newsfeed is all about whatever the data I'm getting, I'm going to re-render it. Okay, it's going to render these things out. So basically, we haven't violated any MVVM architecture patterns. We did all these things by simply using composables, VMs, VM state models, and simply that's it. Okay, so I know it might be a little bit hard for you guys to understand at first, but believe me, when you get the hang of it, it makes more sense rather than you calling someone and making those changes. Okay, so key things to remember: how to declare a VM, how to declare the state for the VM, how to declare a feature component, how to declare a dummy component, and do the gluing all together. Okay, so it should be fairly easy for you guys now. Okay, any questions from this section, guys? Any questions? Okay, please stop sharing. And, that's the stop button for the record. Okay.